There it is.
Aloha and welcome to Mystery, Mystics, and Metaphysics. I'm your host, Psychic Intuitive Geraldine St. Joseph, and today we're going to be speaking to two special people who I work with. I'll introduce them a little bit later. What we're going to do to start off, since we're talking about nefarious, and we're going to be talking about nefarious things, we are going to start off by doing a clearing and a blessing. And that way, hopefully, blessedly, our stream will continue and we won't have any weird interruptions. So let's begin. Take a deep breath and release. Relax. And again, and release. Relax. There's a ball of white light above our heads. From it emanates shafts of light that enter us through the tops of our heads and fills us with its energy. This is the energy of Source, of the universe, of God, the all that is, and the Christ. It is pure, unconditional love. Feel this energy as it moves through you. Releasing you from all negativity. Cleansing, balancing, protecting. See yourself as glowing from within. The ball of white light descends until it is around us. It covers each and every one of us. The white light is sent through our Wi-Fi, through the electronics, to cleanse and clear it of all contortion, so that we may have this discussion and you may hear this discussion, so that you may hear it and feel it and be blessed by the Christ and God, so that you may rest easy in understanding and grace. We call for the presence of the angels of God, our guardians and guides, Jesus the Christ, Mother Mary, and Saint Joseph. We feel their strength in and around us. And we ask for their protection and their guidance now and always. And the ball of white light spreads to our friends and family, throughout our communities, our cities, our nations. And we ask that peace be brought, that justice be served, and that light be paramount. Amen. And thank you. So, one of the first things I want to say that I've been meaning to do a short on, but I haven't, is that I feel like whenever something goes well in your life, whenever something good happens or even slightly on your side, a really good practice is to always say thank you, because I feel like when we have a sense of gratitude, that that gratitude helps us to shift our energy into a more blessed state, a more graceful state. So whenever, like, if I'm looking for something and I find it, I say thank you. If I'm lost and I find my way, I say thank you. I just say thank you. And for me, like, that's one of my little tips and tricks to help keep you more balanced and in a sense of gratefulness, instead of having to constantly having to try to shift that way, because you're there all the time. So I'm going to have you guys introduce yourselves, since you're going to be part of the video, and how we all met one another. And I'll let Thomas go first. Tomas.
Well, I first had, I think Allison is in the waiting room,
Oh.
and I sent a note to say, hold on a sec. So then I lost my admit button. So,
Um, oh, you know what? I never took back the host. Ba-dum. Yes. I don't know. I think she dropped off.
okay, I sent her a note that's what it was during the prayer. I sent her a note to say, hold on a sec.
Okay. Yes. I think she fell by the wayside there, unfortunately. So if you want to introduce yourself, and I'll let Allison know.
Okay, yeah. You guys know me, and anybody else that's going to be on here may know me. I'm Tom, and I've taken the Geraldine gave me the alias of Thomas Anchovy, so I think it's because Geraldine and I like anchovies. And that's about it. We go back, the three of us here go back to around 2007, thereabouts, and we have a lot together. I think that the reason that we're here and excited about this is because I don't know about calling it a movie. Nefarious is a whole lot more than that. It's actually seems more like advanced credits towards demonology and um, spiritual influence, mental illness, and what? Let me ask the two of you. Do either of you guys ever go to Walmart?
If I have to.
Okay. There's if you have an extra $10 and you go to Walmart, pick this up.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I mention that is because all of the extras that are on there are like the second half of the movie. And I have here pages of notes to go over tonight. We'll be here till probably around 10 o'clock, going over things that are in all of the bonus extras that are there. So anyway, I'm going way past my introduction. Go ahead, Tamara.
I'm Tammy, and like Tom said, we go back to 2007. I'm really excited about this because I told Tom about this movie a year ago. When I first saw it, it was like everything I always knew, but couldn't like explain or maybe validate would be a better word. Um, and so, as somebody who hunted ghosts and work with families, you'd think I'd love horror and paranormal shows and things like that, but I actually hate them
Mm-hmm.
because most of them either do more harm than good by enticing people into non-reality or a lot of the exorcism movies, even the exorcism of the Pope for one, I mean, they're just so not realistic and normal. And it's so deceptive. And I remember from being a little girl on up, my mother saying, Tammy, you and your demons and ghosts. And it was like a joke to her until she saw my wetsuit hanging one day and thought she saw one. But um, I've seen and known about this my whole life, just instinctually. So when I saw this movie, it was like, to me, I wish everybody could see it and truly understand how it works instead of the theater that's promoted in Hollywood.
So talk about your background, because people who are watching this may not know about our backgrounds together. About you were part of a ghost hunting group, was it?
Yeah, Hope Paranormal, but we only take cases with kids that have attachments. My interest has always been demonology,
Mm-hmm.
not to say that I'm an exorcist or anywhere near that level, just that as a person growing up as a Christian, I found that the church was very strong in their convictions of everything you should not do and why you would go to hell. But when I would go to them with cases on, okay, but this is going on, help them, they were afraid. And to the point that once I looked at a minister and said, I don't know what kind of impotent God you serve, but I don't want any part of that. And his reaction was not
Wow.
kind, but it's how I feel. And it was not directed at God, but whatever fantasy that they promote in the church that would believe they can pick out certain books of the Bible and yet go right through the book of Acts or anything that would tell you of the power that Jesus left for all of us to do. We don't
Mm-hmm.
want people suffering. And unfortunately, as we'll discuss later with the movie, mental illness and demonic attachments and in worst case possession happen in so many levels that eventually one breeds the other, and it's hard to know which is first or dominant sometimes. And to watch churches, my ex-husband was the turning point for me.
Mm-hmm.
There was a clear demonic possession, or maybe not possession, but attachment maybe would be a better word, controlling him to the point that he ended up in a psych ward. His family came to me and said, please come see him. I said, absolutely not. I'm not getting involved in that. Nobody believes it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to then become the target because, as we'll talk about in the movie, the demons know the gospel better than we do, and they're going to use every sin against you. And I just didn't want to open myself up to that, but ultimately did, and it didn't disappoint, getting attacked by everybody in the family. But I went to three supposedly deliverance ministers, one of them being his brother, who would not help him, and all acknowledged that they could see the demonic presence, literally see it. His face would change, and they wouldn't do anything. And it was at that point, it's like, well, if that's the God we serve, I've got more power myself. Like that's just unacceptable. And it wasn't meaning to say I did, just that their lack of faith was appalling to me.
And I think that's what it comes down to,
Yep.
is not so much knowing scripture, but having faith
Right.
that this is possible and that the things that Jesus told us about are possible,
Exactly.
and knowing deep in your core who you are as a child of God.
Mhm.
I mean, I know a lot of people get all up in arms when you talk about religion nowadays and all that kind of thing. And people, oh, I'm not religious. Well, I was raised Roman Catholic, and I have since moved on from organized religion because I can speak on a greater to a greater number of people if we don't talk about dogma, because dogma is not helpful to anybody.
Right.
And we talk about like the faith that's there. So the way I met you guys was that Tom had a meetup back in the day, and I was invited in as a speaker. I had just written my book, Paranormal Activity, What Are You Dealing With? To delineate between all the different, well, not all the different types, but key types of entities that you may have an attachment with, or you may have interference from, and that kind of thing. And that was amazing that night, because then I had to go immediately thereafter to help a little one who was dealing with this, in a family with several children that was dealing with a very troubling, um, I wouldn't call it a possession, but it was definitely wreaking havoc in the home and would take control of one of the kids. There was one kid that was being targeted, and it would absolutely take control of that child at different times and create very stressful situations for the rest of the family. So I want to talk about first, I want to talk about the movie, but as we're talking about the movie, I want us to each talk about our experiences with different things that we've dealt with personally that we have a personal experience of.
You may not remember this, but you
Mm.
actually came and spoke at my meetup as well. It was the
Oh,
only night my father ever attended. And I remember him being so impressed with the whole, what we did, because, people's conception and the reality are never the same.
mm-hmm.
But you actually, that was the only thing he ever attended that I did in my life.
Oh,
And you
wow.
had him as a guest speaker.
Oh, I feel honored. Yeah. I try to speak in a way that I'm heard. And I think that's one of the things is that people get really theatrical with things and they talk about, like, I mean, I've seen some stuff. I've seen some stuff, but that's not the stuff that most people will see. Like, that's when it gets to a point where people are, ready to end it, and they don't know what else to do. And somehow they find someone like me or like you who is willing to help. I guess that's the point. Because I mean, even going in with that child, when I first met y'all, I mean, somebody else had gone in before and she had done the sage, and she told him unequivocally that that was not demonic. I'm like, the dude's got black eyes. His toys are working by themselves. He got thrown across the room. What do you think it is exactly if it's not demonic? Like, what do you think is doing that? So it can be very frustrating.
Well,
Now, I don't
because
know.
people's interpretation of demonic, in the movie, it talks about stages, it talks about permissions,
Mm-hmm,
and people don't understand that. And so when they think about a demonic possession, they think about Linda Blair in The Exorcist. That's not the reality of what you run into every day in life. And the fact is that every choice we make is a decision, and it's either a good or a bad decision. And those are permissions that he's talking about. And people don't understand that. So they don't take it seriously. And they don't understand that it's prevalent in every household, to a certain degree. It's how much you're going to allow it.
mm-hmm. And that's a big part of it is the allowing, and that I think is part of why people push it away, because they don't want to have that responsibility that they brought some of this on itself. Now, I have seen innocence be brought in where is sometimes they'll come in through the parent, sometimes they'll come in through like a head injury or something like that. But on the larger scale, it's the little things, it's the subtle stuff, you know. Tom, tell us about your experience when you were attacked on your bike.
Well, I was I was I have no recollection of it. I was went for a bicycle ride one day, and then the next thing, all I knew was I woke up the next. Well, I came to the next day. My body was functioning, but my consciousness was not there. And I came to the next day in the hospital when they wanted to wheel me out. But um, all I can say about that whole experience is that it's showing me the degree of angel protection that I have, because that was a magnificent opportunity for something to come at me. And even the doctors there uh, told Gloria, they said, your husband may be angry, he may have fits of anger and one thing and another. They knew the effect, but they don't know the cause, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And but that episode there was to me was an illustration of my angelic protection team, because I was ripe for something to come in. And that's kind of what that was about. But my friend Dave here, he's a U.S. Marine, and he's the most kind of like the most gentlest, good person you could imagine. But however, he can take on anything just about, and he is a regular churchgoer, and he has told me that he should have been killed several times. He should have been in jail several times. But it's the fact that his angels are protecting him. And but getting back to your original point, that was that to kind of make a long story short, that was the situation, and the takeaway for me was the fact that I have a terrific protection. Tammy has told me uh, about this type of thing several times, and she says I'm blessed. But yeah, there's things that, and the movie here was captivating to all of us because of the fact it was accurate, and being brought up in the religion that I've been brought up in, which is quite different than most religions, and there is no dogma attached, and there's nothing they don't instill any fear or anything. That's one of the reasons I was taken in by this movie, because of the fact that I thought that it was just so well done. And I cannot emphasize enough that anybody should go out there who has seen the movie should go get the disc so you can see all of the making of and the things that went on. I have a whole pages of things that I should go here. If you'd like, I'll run down the things that happened to them on the set.
Let's talk about the movie first, and then we'll talk about the making of. So the film itself is set in a room, which is why a lot of people won't watch it, because it's about the dialogue and the tension between primarily two people. And there are a handful of other people that come in and out, but for the most part, it's those two people speaking. And it's the demonic who is within a gentleman by the name of Ed, right? His name was Ed, and a psychologist who comes to ascertain whether Ed should be executed because he is sane and able to be executed, or he is insane and unable to be executed. Now, as you can see with those two choices, there is no choice. This dude is not himself. There's something inside of him that's controlling his body, not one of the choices that's there. But as we begin the movie, and lots of spoilers, this is nothing but spoilers tonight. So if you're going to watch the movie, watch it. But I think it would be just as good after we talk about it, as it might even be better than watching it before we speak. But it's about the conversation between these two. So the psychologist comes in, he's supposedly an atheist, and Ed, at first, like, and most of the time, it's the demonic speaking, and you can see it. And that's one of the parts that's very realistic, is you saw sometimes it'll be the same face, but it's the attitude is different. The way that the body is held is different. And the actor was amazing. I mean, he should get all kinds of awards for that, because the difference between Ed and Nefarious were so stark. And if you're paying attention, once you're full blown like that, it is stark like that. It can be really stark. Sometimes, I mean, I've seen people whose eye color changed, and it's not like from blue to black, but I've seen somebody with brown eyes have blue eyes, and they'll shift and change depending on what's going on in there. The eyes really are the portal to the soul. It doesn't always happen, but it is a symptom. And then he's trying to convince the psychologist that, well, you're not sure in the beginning. You think he's trying to save his life, but you find out that he's not really trying to save his life. And he tells the psychologist right from jump, he says, well, I'm going to tell you nothing but the truth, but you're not going to believe a word I say. And before you leave here, you will have killed 3 innocents. And that was fascinating, the way they revealed who the deaths were, because if you're watching it like a regular movie, you're expecting him to go crazy and he's going to grab somebody's gun and they're going to go shooting people and blah, blah, blah. And that was not it at all. Again, it was very subtle. And it was showing you the steps that were taken for him to become vulnerable to this demon. And then Stunad is like, oh, well, if you're a demon, you come inside me, like idiot. So a lot of times I use these films to train um, uh, my child a lot, who's not a child, he's an adult now, but whenever we watch these kind of movies, or what did this person do wrong? What did they do right? What should have happened here? How could they have prevented this? And there are always steps along the way that you can take that make things easier or make things um, so that you are stronger and that you can protect yourself, and so that you have that protection around you. And I'll let Tammy take it from there. What struck you most about, say, the first half of the movie, like when they were talking?
Well, I don't mean this in a political way, but the liberal attitude of the psychologist is reflectant on the ideology in the world today. He was bragging about how far humanity had come, that we're not prejudiced anymore, we're accepting, we can love who we want. He was going through a whole litany of crowing about how great humanity is, and the demons laughing. Because the reality is, it is in acceptance of the little things that we know are not correct that open the doors. And on a note of how could you protect yourself, ego was the downfall of him.
Mm-hmm.
Every time the demon would say something to stroke his ego, he wasn't having it. So that's how the invitation, all right, inhabit me. And in his ignorance, did not understand that he had eternity. And he said that to him. Oh, you're powerless. But he said, no, I'm patient.
Yeah,
That's
that
what
was so
people,
eerie, that line.
it was very eerie. And, from the very beginning, there's subtleties. Like as he's pulling into the prison, they showed a shot of a bird on the razor wire watching him come. He couldn't understand through this movie how he knew so much about him. But this is what I find in cases that we work with. Frequently, people will know we're coming. The entities know you're coming.
Oh
They're
yeah.
watching, and people are shocked by that. And I remember a house in Red Lion, and Lily said, I've never seen you come with such an attitude. Like, what is the matter with you tonight? I said, I know what's here. And so does the little boy. And he looked at me and told his mom that. And it was a constant reminder that they're always everywhere watching. The book This Present Darkness is a perfect example of spiritual warfare all around us, and people ignore it. And we're so upset with humanity, but it isn't humanity. It's the control of the spirits, both positive and negative, that we're dealing with, and the Bible's clear about it. So that's what, his ego and his just condescending, thinking he's got it all together attitude struck me as the downfall of humanity and of him in that movie.
I like the part where he was like, where the Nefarious was telling him, oh, he says, yeah, he says, do you know there's more people enslaved in the world right now than at any other time? And he said, even more than in the Roman Empire.
Right.
He said, and a certain percentage of those are sex slaves. He goes, we didn't even come up with that. You came up with that. That wasn't even a sin that we thought about. That was yours. He said, all you have to do is show humanity a little bit, and they are very creative, he said, with their sins. I was like, wow.
Yeah.
I agree with you with that, about hubris being the problem, and him coming and being like, well, we have all the freedom. We have so much freedom now. And he's like, yes, you do.
And the hatred that was expressed all through the movie for humanity, even to denying a meal. I mean,
Mhm.
that really that really hit me to see it like played out, um, how badly we truly are hated.
Hmm.
It is their only mission of existence is to screw up our lives any way that they can. And that's not a good thought to know that they can do that.
Well, and the thing is, they can only do it if we allow it to a certain extent.
But so many people are allowing it today. That's why it's terrifying because they really, it's almost like I wonder if they know, really what they're doing. I mean, I guess I'm one that believes that evil doesn't come without invitation of
Hmm.
some kind. Um, but giving their time frame of forever, how many kids haven't played with Ouija boards and how many kids haven't had seances or, I mean, and it doesn't need to be that extreme. Like he talked about the first time you stole a toy or,
Hmm.
you just think about those in everyday life. Well, kids will be kids, but when you get away with it, it's an invitation to step up your game. Why
Hmm.
there's no risk.
Yeah. So I have a question for you too. Do you notice that when people have had experiences like these or even extreme paranormal experiences, that as they get further from it, they seem to forget about it or kind of negate it? Because I've seen that a lot with clients. Like you come back a couple years later, if nothing else has happened or nothing else that extreme has happened, they'll like it's not even really barely in their memory. Like
Well,
they want to
exactly.
act like
It
that
happened
wasn't what it was.
with my ex that I was talking about. I have not had contact with that situation for about a year and a half. And I asked the other day how that was going, and the excuses and change of the situation boggled my mind. Whereas at one point, his wife and everybody involved was 100% sure of a demonic attachment. Now it's, well, he was going through a hard time, or, now he doesn't take his meds right, and that's why he's having problems. Yes, it's mind-boggling to me how easy it is to dismiss something that traumatic.
Well, and that's the way that the human mind works, though, is to deny, to pretend like, oh, that's not really happening. That's part of the reason why it can be really blatant at times. And people are just like, that's not what it is. That's not what it is. And that's what allows so much real trauma to occur, real trauma, because now like everything is like trigger warning. Oh, and this offends me and that offends me. But all that's little stupid things, like the real stuff that happens, like the very big things, the things that cut deep, that stuff is still poo-pooed half the time. Oh, it couldn't have been that bad.
Right.
What are you talking about? And the more that all the surface stuff gets treated like it's something, the more that the deeper stuff gets swept away because there's no
Well, people
space.
are brainwashed. I mean, the constant barrage. Like my granddaughter actually sent me a Google definition of toxicity,
Hmm.
and I'm like, you can't apply that to these people. Like everybody's an individual. You have to have, like Tom always says, totality of circumstance. Like, do you want to be labeled into a box because of an action or a thought? But this is the mindset today, is total almost brain control that's taking place, to the point that when you're faced with actual reality, you don't recognize it because the other is so ingrained. And so permission just is granted nonstop for things 10 years ago we would have never allowed.
Hmm.
We don't even have to go back, decades and generations. I mean, 10 years ago, even 5 years ago.
What almost seems to me like I've watched several people pass recently, and it's like there's this steady decline that's like little, and then all of a sudden you fall off a cliff. Like the last week is always like bam.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the way I feel. I feel like for a very long time it's been this, we were here in our moors, and then it keeps going down, down, and down. And I'm not talking about hating people for who they love or anything like that. I'm talking about just the cruelty and the audacity to be so disrespectful to one another, like you are the center of the world. I mean, they even have a name for it. They call it
Keyboard warrior.
well, keyboard warriors, but they consider themselves the main character syndrome,
Oh my
that
God.
they're the main character in their story, so everything is supposed to work around them, which by the time you're 2 or 3 you're supposed to be out of that. you know like okay. So so Tom, do you want to talk about like the next, I mean, I know we're jumping all over the place, but when he was really explaining to the doctor how he came upon Ed and what he did to this man, um, do you want to explain any of that process that was discussed?
Well, a lot of that is indicated in the behind the scenes as to how they have notes here on it. They had they had
I
on-site
also have
priests.
notes.
They had on-site priests and exorcists, but this is what you're mentioning there is the exorcist interview afterwards said that when they go to do it, an exorcism, they have to find out how the negative entities got rights into the person, and they have to. Their job is to help the victim rescind those rights, and so on. So when he was talking about this, as you mentioned, um, and talking it over with someone who was declared atheist, who we've all seen these people. They just Tammy's email signature file says, "What is this, Tammy? Ignorance is the root of all evil." And I find that the more experience and the more research I do into this, unfortunately, you get to a point where you come to such that you can't talk to people because of the fact that they don't understand. And when you see the things that go on, I've been mentioning for many, many years that that mental illness is can quite be negative entities and so on people. But the steps of getting into, as Tammy mentioned before, the steps can start just like they mentioned in the movie, where you start off with a little thing where you steal a toy, and then it leads to another and to another and to another. There was a line in the end of the movie that the one priest was saying, in every step you make, you are coming closer to goodness or stepping away. And with what's going on in the world today, it's so difficult because the insight that we have, and you can't talk to other people. But yes, back to your original point, the entry that Edward was discussing to an atheist. I guess we come in contact. We have that happen to us. I'm trying to catch myself when I talk to anybody about any of these things, is to just pull back and stop and don't mention anything, because a lot of times you're trying to speak just like Galileo or Copernicus to the Catholic Church in the 1500s, that the Earth is not the center of the universe, and then you'll be lambasted, killed, or whatever. But hold on, Sparky, you stay over there. Yeah, it this I can't say enough about the movie. Another movie that's like this is called The Man from Earth, and it's just takes
Oh yeah, I
place
love that movie.
just takes place in one room, and it's absolutely captivating. And you were mentioning also other things about the spiritual warfare behind the scenes. A magnificent illustration of that is the movie Ink.
Oh yeah, that was great.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like, I think part of the problem, like even with this movie, it's based on this conversation, and people want to see things blowing up.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
they're so used to seeing things blowing up that they don't know how to pay attention and just listen and being involved in the conversation.
There's
That's
just so
where the
many.
movie Shift would step up that
Mm-hmm.
gap, because that's a great spiritual message as well. but you have the things to keep people interested, blowing things up and yeah.
Shift.
Well, and the writer of Nefarious, called A Nefarious Plot, is the name of the book. When he was called to get the rights to make the movie, he said that there can be no cheese, meaning no cheesy scenes.
Mm-hmm.
And and I think over when you make a movie, it has to be successful. And I see it in trailers. They'll take the schlockiest, cheesiest parts and blow it up so that they suck in the masses that want to see that kind of thing,
Mm-hmm.
and then they have their message. This movie, Nefarious, I consider a stealth movie because uh, if you look at the trailer up front and so on, it looks like it's going to be one of those schlocky horror movies, possibly, and you're expecting, like Tammy was mentioning, something like The Exorcist or whatever, but it draws people in to a different theme, and uh, yeah, it's like you said. I don't know. I don't watch the Academy Awards because that's, to me, is 100% garbage. But I said that Edward should have what was his name, Flaherty.
I
He
think
should have.
so.
He
Yeah.
should. I mean, at least be nominated for Best Actor. But because of the nature of this movie, I'm sure it didn't even get mentioned there.
Yeah. I mean, his acting was absolutely
Sean Patrick Flannery.
Don,
Mhm.
Don,
Sean.
Sean.
Sean Patrick Flannery.
Mm.
Yes, he was amazing, and just like his switching back and forth. And when you've seen that in person, oh, there he goes. Yep, very nice. When you've seen that in person in front of you, it means so much more when you see it on the screen like that, where he changed. Like I've seen people, like their whole demeanor changes, just so much changes with the way you hold yourself, whether you're holding yourself with power and confidence, or whether you're afraid or timid, or soft or shy, or however. It makes a really big difference. So what he talked about was that um, it comes in degrees of control, and with each step they gain more control over the body and mind of the person. So the first is extreme temptation. So they tempt you with different things. And he says it could start at any point during the lifetime. They like to start young because then they have them for more time. But it could start at any point in the lifetime. Extreme temptation. So when you're giving into temptations like stealing the truck, stealing candy, shoplifting, lying, things like that, then that gives them a certain degree of control. The second step was obsession. So you become obsessed with something, or you start doing something regularly, not even thinking about it. So an obsession is something that you do that just takes your focus, that is so there in front of you that it's like it's the only thing that's in front of you. The third was infestation. And I thought that was interesting because I use that word a lot, infestation. So I want to ask you two what you felt that meant and what you've seen of that, and then I'll talk about what I think it is. Tammy, I'll let you go first.
I would consider an infestation when it's affecting every area of your life at that point.
Mm-hmm.
It may not be total control, but certainly affecting your interpersonal relationships, your decision making, your self-esteem, um, maybe your hopes for a future. That's what I would see at that level, if that's how I would describe it.
And how about you, Tom?
Just say about the same thing there. Attachment would be, I consider, an infestation.
So he said something that I thought was interesting that I have said, and that's that demons are unilocational. So they can only be in one place at one time. So when I see infestations, what I see, yes, it's doing a lot in their life, But I see it as there's multiple entities there so that you never have a moment of peace.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times, like the bigger guys, they'll have their eyes on more than one person. So they're here and then they jump there and then they're here and then they're there. But they have minions, like the little, I call them wasps, that kind of hang on to you. They're the ones whispering in your ear, negative things all the time. And they're the ones that are constantly on top of you, but there's a lot of them so that they're always there.
He
And it
said that in
changes
the
all the
movie.
time.
He
What?
said we are legion, for
Yeah.
there are many. And he also said that my master's very generous with his toys for all of us.
Mm-hmm.
So he was implying exactly that. And that, it's a hierarchy, just like anything else in life or death.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
So I
agree.
thought that was interesting. My favorite quote from the movie was, sometimes smart people don't believe things everyone else knows.
Can I say a word about that? I would
Yes.
consider that the liberal elite.
Yeah.
Agree.
Endemic throughout society today. My
Yeah.
brother came, where was it? I think it was my brother Woody, with I saw somewhere it said, these people think they're too smart for the Bible.
Yeah. They want to poo poo everything, but it's still, there's messages there that are important. You know, some things were definitely very suited to that time period and what was happening right then. But the bigger messages expand out for always. Like, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not, sleep with thy neighbor's wife. You shouldn't lie, you shouldn't kill, you shouldn't steal. Like, they're basics, basic, basic, basic. And yet we don't perceive it that way any longer,
See,
or society doesn't.
I think it's a little different than that for me.
Mm-hmm.
When you talk about the Ten Commandments, um, they're not just action, but they're thought and deed.
Mm-hmm.
And so to me, um, the life of Jesus was to show people that nobody can live up to any kind of standard. He was very clear that even if you had an issue with your brother, to leave even a communion and make peace with one another, that the greatest commandment was to love God, but that was the second greatest commandment. And the purpose of Jesus was because nobody can live up to those standards. And I feel like he kind of threw that away, to not to say go do what you want to do. I don't mean that, but that those weren't just deeds that he was referring to. If you're lusting after your neighbor's wife, that's a sin.
Well, that's covet. Yeah, that's in there. Thou shalt
Right.
not covet thy neighbor's wife.
But if you hate somebody, you're killing them because you're killing their spirit.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it was not just the literal interpretation. And that's been lost today, even in church. And it's sad to say, because I was brought up Catholic as well, and we'll probably pay for that the rest of our life in a way. But I get so angry. My best friend and business partner, Lily, her daughter is constantly making jabs at Christians and all they do wrong. And I'm like, but, they're just people. And, they don't deserve to be judged to a different standard. They're going to answer for what they do just like everybody else. The only difference is they've accepted that there is a God and there is salvation and there is hope. And I don't know why she doesn't understand that, but she started on that on St. Patrick's Day, and about everybody celebrating that because, that was really about killing people. And okay, but if we went through every holiday and picked them apart, I don't know what would be left standing, including her Wiccan holidays.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a shame that people have fought a lifetime over religion, because the reality is most religions are saying basically the same thing. And there's always extremists in every lifestyle that make everybody else look bad. And it's not the reality of the majority.
Right. And I think that's a really good point, that everybody should not be judged by the squeakiest wheel. Just
No.
because somebody's loud doesn't mean they're right or they're representative. But
Yes.
by the same token, that doesn't mean that you don't have to do something about the wheel,
Right, that's true.
So,
Or you know, we all need guidance every day.
mhm,
We all fall short, but when you start judging other people's actions and labeling a whole movement, it is the textbook definition of the discrimination she wants to fight so hard against.
mhm. Well, it's all about, I think, separation.
Yeah.
Like when we talk about love, the universe, source, Christ, it's all about unity and bringing things together in a loving and uplifting manner all together. Whereas when people become physical, then they're all about separating.
Mhm.
They're all about
Well,
like
there's a
pulling
line.
apart.
Now you just touched on a line in the movie
Mhm.
where the it was God made you in His image and we remade you in ours. Now
Yeah, that was a good one. Yeah.
that's a whole 40-hour week discussion right there.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was amazing. So we did infestation. He said the next is possession and then subjugation. So what do you think the difference between those two is? And I'll let Tom answer first this time. What's
Okay,
the
give
difference
me
between possession and then subjugation?
well there's the degrees of possession. Um, you saw the back and forth between Edward and Nefarious. Okay, with Edward in control, I mean, with Nefarious in control, and Edward coming and going to different degrees of the possession. I guess when you are in full possession, your original soul and the body becomes secondary to the possession. The subjugation, well, then that's what the whole movie was about. All the crimes that Edward did as he was subjected to the control or the possession of Nefarious.
So what do you think the difference was, Tammy?
Total separation. I think with possession, you can still perhaps have uh, interaction in society, um, though it may not be yours. But once you're subjugated, I think you're totally isolated. I think that's when there's no hope to redeem.
Yeah. So what I see the difference as is when you're in the possession phase, the entity will pop in and out.
Mhm.
So they're not always there. They're not always front and center. They're around maybe, or their minions are around, but they're not always on top of you. But once you hit subjugation, which is when you're so low that there's really not enough of you to support the physical body anymore because your energetic is so depleted, then that's subjugated where you have no control. Whereas in possession, if at some point the soul gets that, I don't know, burst of faith or burst of energy, like when I do an exorcism or depossession, the first thing I do is I pull the soul forward and I have them front and center and back in control of the body, and then they have to say, what is your choice? Are you are you taking responsibility for this body? Is this yours? And is this your lifetime? Or are you going to give it over to that? Like, you need to tell me, do you want help? Do you want Jesus? Do you want, Christ's love, the Christ to come in and free you from this? Or what are you doing? And I have, and then subjugation, I feel like it's almost impossible to really pull them out
Yep.
because they can't control the whole body.
There's a book C.S. Lewis wrote called The Great Divorce. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
Mm-hmm.
But it talks about a demonic control a little bit and a person actually having a chance to rid themselves of that demonic control. They use symbolism. I feel like it might have been a dragon or something. But anyway, they do a lot of what's in this movie, which is kind of sad in that first well, I don't want you to kill it. And, when you were talking about choice, that came to my mind, like every time they had a choice, the angel was going to smite it and put an end to it. Well, I think I can handle it. I think, because as you're popping in and out, you do have periods of hope and
Hmm.
periods of interaction. And if somebody isn't right there to get you at that moment, you probably will end up totally isolated at some point and lost with no way to reach him. It's not that there isn't hope as long as you're alive, but the reality of catching that is just so small. And I think C.S. Lewis knew that when he wrote about it, how hard of a struggle it is when you get to
Well,
that
and the
point.
other side of it is that, I mean, I've had people who I've helped, and then months later, like they're calling me again. Like, well, what are you doing? I gave you what you needed to stay clear. And they talk about it in the Bible quite often about clearing the house, and then the entity comes back with friends and they're stronger. And that is exactly the way it happens if you don't maintain.
Right.
And people, when they have these moments of possession, oftentimes they feel strong. They feel more confident than they ever did. They do things that they wouldn't normally do because it's not really them, but they see it as a strength. And when you take it away, they feel weak because they have to build themselves back up. And rather than do that, they just call the entity back in because that's easy.
I mean, I think
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Good, Tom.
a lot of the material you guys are talking about right now, I relate to the final stages of Alzheimer's, the original soul coming and going, and then a negative trying to take control of that body.
Yeah.
That's a theory that I have that makes sense to me as an analyst.
Yeah. And that's so, it's such a destructive disease, not just to the person that it's happening to, but to the family and everyone connected to them. I,
People go and they say they come out of a hospital room and they say that's not my grandmother in there. And it just from a standpoint of logic, it seems like that as you were mentioning, as the soul gets weaker and weaker, comes and goes. There are things out there that want a body,
mhm,
and they'll my hold on a second here, my cord. Um, they will come and go as the body, like from the book One Body, Many Souls.
mhm,
And as the person's dying off, they're losing control of their body. Their soul is kind of coming up and down, and there's things out there that are trying to take it. It just makes so much sense to me because people talk and they get my friend's sweet old proper English grandmother turned into a raving, unbelievably horrible, vile-mouthed person in her final stages, and to me that was a something coming and going.
yeah. I've seen several people become very violent when they were very gentle, but I've also seen the opposite. People who are real jerks becoming much nicer.
Well, yeah,
So
the
I
other
guess it
side of the
depends on
coin.
what's around.
The other side of the coin, yeah.
Yeah. So so
Well,
to me that
Nefarious,
was big. Go ahead.
when I forget what you just said, but when Nefarious was talking about that, he said that, one of the, oh, you said about people feeling strong.
Hmm.
Well, he said that my master promises I'll give you everything in the world. So of course they're going to feel strong. They have everything at their disposal. That's why it's so hard to give it up. And
Hmm.
I find that too. If and Bill Bean, who travels the globe doing deliverance ministries, has always said that if he ever put his guard down, he knows that he would be attacked again. You have to fill those spaces with positive at all times, or they come back. It's a vacuum almost, and it sucks in whatever's nearby. When you empty that space, something
Hmm.
else has to fill it. And people get complacent and, oh well, you fixed my problem now, so I'm okay. And then it starts worse.
Yeah. So we're starting to get questions. I don't know if you guys could see it also. So basically, how do you know the difference between issues and attachments? How do you differentiate those two things? And our wounds are all wounds out of the demonic. It's all out of its mind. Okay.
What does she mean by issues?
Like you have an issue, a mental illness, or you have OCD, or you have something like that, versus having something on your shoulder nagging you on to do different things.
Well, remember, obsessive behavior is a step
That's one
along
of the
the way
steps. Yep.
of, and unfortunately, one creates the other. As I saw in my ex-husband, the psychiatrist wanted to believe that it was what do they call it now? It's not multiple personality or schizophrenia.
DOD, DID,
I don't, but anyway, I
DID.
wanted to
Yeah.
blame it on that. But, the thing was, it happened when he was given his testimony in a church. And as long as somebody was reading the gospel to him, he was calm. I mean, his everything about his demeanor changed. So, I mean, people can have issues, but the issues can lead to permissions.
Mm-hmm.
And so whenever a Catholic church, for example, does grants permission for exorcism, they have to rule out mental illness, which is why it takes so long. When Bill Bean works with people, like I have a book, and there's this whole exorcism prayer that talks about sins of the past and lineage and connections and hexes and vex. I mean, it goes through everything, because I don't think you have time to wait for a psychological evaluation. There's always multiple things at play.
Mm-hmm.
And, they'll just get stronger if they're not addressed.
Well, and she's asking like patterns of behavior out of self-doubt. When you talk to yourself negatively, things like that. So is it coming from getting beat by your mom, or is it coming from an outside force? Is it a mixture of both? I think that's the question.
I think it's a mixture of both.
Yep. And
Yeah.
push it back. Just don't accept it. Push it back.
Yeah. I always say argue with yourself.
Yeah.
Say, no, that's not the way it is. And I'm not doing that. And eventually you do get to a point where that happens less and less,
Yeah.
and possibly to where it's not happening anymore, except on very rare occasion. And I think it's really important for people, like when I'm teaching about self-empowerment and stuff, the first thing is to figure out what's going on inside your head, because most of what's going on inside your head is not you. That there's only a small piece of it that's you, and a small piece of it that's spirit. And how to tell and differentiate, I think one of the big things that we've lost in this last generation especially is discernment. Like there is no discernment. Everything is the same. Everything is flat. If you say this, oh, it's this. Like they just, everything is so overblown that there's no nuance, there's no discernment. And you need to listen, you need to pay attention, you need to look in order to be able to discern what is my voice, what is spirit's voice, what is something coming from outside of me. Am I picking up radio waves? Is this my mom yelling at me from 10 years ago? Is it something completely different that I don't recognize the voice? Like what is it? And we don't do that. And we don't teach kids to do that, because they're constantly
Yep.
on their things and looking for outside stimulation and looking for outside approval and all that kind of thing. Is it important to block out outside world issues such as political problems, media fear tactics, in order to avoid spiraling? Is meditation the key to that? Tom, I'll let you take that one.
Well, along those lines, I think that you might want to not be completely ignorant of what's going on, but don't dwell on it. That's for sure. And the world events are a very tough thing. How old is Allison?
10 years younger than me. 45.
Okay, 47.
47.
Okay. Well, Allison has a fairly good horizon there, but younger people these days, I think, if you're 20 years old, you just don't have any idea of the way things were in a different time before all this evil comes into the world. But the original question, I believe she was read that again, the original question.
Original question is it important to block out outside world issues in order to avoid spiraling.
Well, I
Is
think
meditation the key to that?
there's a balance on that, I believe. I have a friend, my longest friend from back in the 60s. All he does, only thing he does day in and day out is make himself miserable looking at the headlines. He has nothing else. I think I think it's a fairly good idea to kind of understand where things are coming from. But yes, you have to watch your balance as to how much it's going to affect you and cause you to go down the road. Meditation, the greatest. Just go in there, and I have in here. Gloria comes down many times. I'm listening to rain and thunder, or at a super low frequency tones in here, and just getting into meditation, clearing, and trying to connect with God, Christ, and my good angels. So yes,
Sound meditation
meditation.
is
Hmm?
great. Sound meditation is great.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. And you could call Tammy for that.
The question is kind of personal too. It goes back to that talking about putting people in boxes. If she's watching the headlines and feels herself getting upset and depressed, she already has her answer. She just needs to listen to it. If you can take it and say, I want to be informed, but now I'm going on with my day, then yeah, by all means do that. But if you feel yourself getting angry, upset, depressed, hopeless,
Well,
then
And
then
be careful where
mission's
you're
down
getting
a
your
bad road.
information from. Be
yeah.
careful about where you're getting, like
Yeah,
Google. You just said your granddaughter gave you something from Google. Google right now is not giving the
no.
way they have the algorithm set up. It's going to give you the answer it thinks you want, or the answer it wants to give you, as opposed to the truth. So Google, I don't
Oh,
use
no,
Google at
come on,
all
really?
anymore.
I
It's
never
Oh,
like
have.
it's so
is
No.
bad.
that? Oh, you got to be kidding me, really? I've been anti-Google for 20 years.
Me too.
And you're a tech guy.
Yeah,
So
Google is good to go and a question. Who wrote the song in 1958 about this, that, and the other thing? But anything you got, yes, it's like you said, they have a very heavy agenda, and it's all starting to come out about the social
yeah.
sites, Google, and everything else on that. But yeah, I guess the main thing is that a lot of people don't have the tools these days to think and discern and to realize attacks and one thing and another.
And
Uh,
what I think too with news itself is you need to go to something. Don't watch it on television. Don't watch it on YouTube. There's something different that happens to you when you're watching something and somebody is telling you something versus reading it. Go to ground news. Go to a news source that tells you, well, this is biased this way, or it might be biased this way. This is the most neutral source. That just is facts. Here are the talking points. And when you're reading it, it's different. You're taking it in differently, and you don't have as much of the mucky muck coming in through that. If you can't read, that's a whole different thing. I mean, then you need to find a news source that's middle of the road. But there's so much manipulation right now that it's scary.
and how many
And
times do you see something that says, what you need to know? Gerald and St. Joseph's meetup is on tonight. What you need to know.
yeah, yeah, like so important.
Oh, there's a question. You two guys answer that question. I've got to feed this cat before I get torn apart. I'll be right back.
Okay. So what are the best ways to cleanse your soul, body, home, and set that example for others? So Tammy, I hear music. I
I
hear
love,
sound.
yes. My gong is a good way to cleanse. If I have a client calls and asks me to cleanse their house, I'm not a big believer in sage from a standpoint of clearing out something negative so much, but it certainly has beneficial health-wise. It does cleanse the air. It does lighten the mood. Anything that stimulates your senses in a positive way uplifts your mood.
Mhm.
I'll go through with a drum and break up and clear the energy that way. I'm a big believer in prayer
I
and
love my bells.
faith. Well, I love all my instruments,
Yeah.
but I mean, you would know more about some of the other ways, but that's what works for me, and that's what I use.
So incense is awesome.
Mhm.
My favorite, rose water, is very
You're
high
to
vibe.
blame for that.
Yes.
Oh
Why?
my God, Lily attacks me with it. Attacks me.
It's especially if you bless it, highest vibration on the planet. Like I've been in the middle of doing an exorcism and I have somebody get grabbed by something, just spray the rose water and it's gone. It hates it. They hate it. It's like poop to them.
That's
They
how
don't
I
like
feel
rose.
about it because she gets it in your, oh, you can't leave. Hold on. And I
Yeah.
know what's coming.
Good for your face. Rose
Okay,
water is good for
that's
your
good because
skin.
it's usually covered.
Yeah. So rose water and how to set an example for others or hold that space for others, rather. I would say one of the things that I do when I'm talking to people, and a friend of mine taught me this inadvertently. We called it the patented alcove stare. So when somebody was coming at you with all aggression, because we worked with the public, and people would be screaming in your face. And when people were doing that, Al would just stand there and just be like a complete blank wall and just be like, until they ran out of steam. And inevitably, every time, by the time they got done saying whatever, because they just wanted to rant, they'd be like, okay, all right, bye, or they would apologize. Oh, I'm sorry, I screamed at you. Okay. He never had to give anything away because he just let them yell and didn't take offense, that didn't take anything on, didn't take any offense. It was just like, okay. And that works really well. So I would say holding space for others is about giving them the room to express who they are and what they need in that moment. So it's non-judgment, it's being calm and patient. One of the tricks I like to use is to breathe deeply and slowly, because if you're looking at somebody and you're doing that, they will start doing that because we will mirror each other. So either you're going to mirror their anxiety and anger and whatever, or you're going to be the one controlling the situation and they're going to mirror you. So that's what I tend to do. The other thing I like to do, also holding space for others, is like we did the white light in the beginning, to do a clearing. That is pure unconditional love, and you want to stream that. If somebody is yelling at you or being hostile or upset or anything, even if it's not at you, and you just project that energy out and around yourself and to them, it settles things down. I've had people scream in my face and just get settled down very quickly by doing that. So that's a good way to hold space for others, is to bring in that loving, all encompassing energetic that is going to just smooth everything and make everything much more peaceful. Now, if there's somebody who's really violent, of course, get out of the way. But does it feel tougher to do that recently? Like the last 2 weeks have been really tough on people. Energetically, we are going through multiple things. This human resonance is changing. We got hit with gamma rays from deep space. We have an eclipse coming up. Like all these different things are happening, and energetically, we're shifting into 5D, or some of us will be shifting into 5D. That's a talk topic we've had a couple of times. So yes, the last 2 weeks have been really difficult. And a lot of people I've been getting so many calls with people hysterical on the phone. Just, they cannot contain their sadness and they just are crying. And my advice with that is, as long as it's coming from you, which is from this area, it's your lower throat and your upper chest. As long as it's coming from there, that's you. Cry. You're releasing old stuff, you're releasing emotions, you're letting go of things. And when you actually cry, it actually increases your oxytocin in your body. So it's a good thing to cry. It's very relieving to cry. You don't want to stuff all that down. And right now we can't. People cannot. Caveat for that is, if it's coming from here, You feel pressure here, and that's what's making you want to cry. You tell it, get lost. I am not going to cry, because that is not you. That is something trying to get in and make you experience things that are not yours. So you tell, go away, back off, get your rose water, you spray Tammy with it. It works every time. So, have you been noticing any of that, you two, the last couple of weeks?
Oh,
Yeah.
last couple of years.
Yeah, it's been getting progressively worse. It has been.
It started with the new moon. I don't know how long ago that was, but yeah. And when we hold space for people in a sound bath, they'll often come, can you heal me? No, I can't. But I can stand in agreement, like the Bible talks about.
Mhm.
I'm in agreement that you have a right to be healed and to live your best life and to open up space for them to do it and give them the opportunity, but it's still their choice. They have to reflect on what's causing it, address, what needs to be addressed. You can only take somebody so far, but you stand there in unconditional love and agreement that they can have it.
Yeah, you have to allow.
Yep.
It's just like when you're doing Reiki or any kind of energetic healing work. What you're doing is you're guiding the energy, but it's up to the person. The person can reject it. They can just be like, nope, not dealing with that today. They can choose to pull it back in after it's healed. So I think one of the things that we're missing a lot, that the movie Nefarious, going back to the movie, really brought to light, is our own responsibility, our accountability for things. So there was a part where um, the doctor's girlfriend was going for an abortion, like she was in process of having an abortion. So that's the second innocent life that he murdered. And he kept saying, well, she has the right to choose and it's her body and da da da. And Nefarious is like, you're saying all that, but you know that she wants that baby. You know that she wants to be married to you. You know that she's hanging around and doing it only because you told her to, because you're pressuring her to do this. You know that, but you're trying to push it on her. It's you, and you know it's you. And that just, oh, when
Well,
you
his
went through
face
that
showed
part.
it all. His face at
Yeah,
that point
that was an
showed it.
excellent scene.
Oh yeah.
Mhm.
It was amazing. I was
All
like,
the
wow.
three murders are something that we've excused in society,
Mm-hmm.
and we've justified, and I don't mean liberal as in conservative, Republican, or Democrat. I just mean in our thinking that we've become so wise,
Mm-hmm.
we've overlooked so many things that, like with his mother. And ultimately, what struck me in the end, if there was anything disappointing about the movie, maybe it was that he signed that death warrant, I think almost in anger because of what he had done to him, even
Yeah.
though he knew it was wrong. If, and,
Well,
maybe it,
and then Nefarious wanted that death warrant signed so he could see
and he
Ed
did.
suffer.
And I agree. But I'm just saying, if there was any disappointing part, it was that he gave into that. Like, it was like you just didn't learn after all this. It was disappointing that he still had not learned and still was allowing his ego to control him to that extent.
Yeah. And he didn't learn until the very end,
Right.
and that was, see, I like that because that is the way most people are. Like, you keep hitting them over the head with something and showing them this is the way it is.
Yeah.
This is the way it is. And no, 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 that doesn't work for me. No, no, but this is the way it is.
Yeah, I
And
agree. And it was necessary. It was just like, because by the time he finally got it, I guess my question is it too late? Like, you thought maybe when he did his interview, that he had gotten cleared, but then the last scene in the movie is, hi, did you miss me? Like, and that's the reality, is they're always waiting for the next opportunity.
yep, for the next time you slip up, because he let him get in so far.
He outright encouraged him to. Go ahead, I dare you. he basically called him impotent as well, you know?
We know somebody, I'll never forget in one of our meetups, there was a girl there that we know, and we were talking. One of the people was talking about, or the topic came up about somebody was had sex with the spirit, and I
Oh,
remember this girl. She's over there. She just throws her hands in the air, spreads her legs, and she's like, "Okay, oh please have sex with me, have sex with me." And now she is a disaster, from what I hear these days. She's a complete physical disaster. And we see Tammy and I were talking about this. We were just talking about you, Geraldine, and that was people that go out there and conjure and
why would anybody ever do that?
well,
Stupidity.
yeah. And we're
Hubris.
along those lines. Do you remember when we went down to speak to the Rotarians at the Wrightsville Rotarians down at the Wrightsville House? Well,
Yep.
one of my esteemed friends and somebody we all know, um, who is goes out and does ghost investigations, who's got all kinds of physical problems now. When we were there and we were giving that seminar to the Rotarians, you had a prayer of protection up front and one thing and another. And I remember opening my eyes and looking over and seeing this person. He's like, his eyes are rolling. He's looking up like, oh, who, this is ridiculous. But his life these days, he's got his troubles, and you see so many people that are mock or don't want to hear about these things, and then, well, I guess everybody learns their lessons. Some people the hard way.
Most people, I think it's the hard way.
Yeah,
Well, it's like
unfortunately.
wisdom. I mean, oh, wait, how do they say it? Knowledge is learning through experience. Wisdom is learning through someone else's experience.
Yeah.
I prefer to learn through others. Thank you very much. But I mean, for
I think
myself,
everybody sometimes, especially children, won't listen to the old, but yeah.
yeah, I think a lot of what I've done, but you can call on God no matter what, right? It's never too late. That's the power of Christ. Yes.
Well, did Allison see Allison, did you see the movie?
No, she didn't want to watch it because she's in a space.
Well, first of all, you turn on the subtitles so you don't miss anything. But what Allison just said right there, the atheist in the movie
I don't
was
want that in my brain.
oh, too bad. The atheist in the movie, in the end, he when the execution takes place, he is overpossessed for a second, for a bit by Nefarious. He grabs a gun from a detective that's there, and he points it. He puts it under his chin like that to shoot himself. And you might not catch it in the movie if you don't have the subtitles. He says, "God help me."
Mm-hmm.
And the gun fires three times. The trigger goes three times, but it doesn't fire. And that's an interesting thing. There's been I've seen, where did I see that recently? They were talking about the people who've near death experiences who've died and come back. One person was talking about that. Well, we won't get that's too long a story. But in any event, like Allison said, yes, you can always call on God, your Christ, and your good angels to protect and to pull you out. There's, like I said 50 times already, that in the making of and all the bonus features, they go through all of this in depth. It's really interesting. They had the priest that was on the onset priest. He would be talking about things, and then they would stop, and they had text across the screen, scriptural text about what he was talking about for protection, amongst other things.
I worked on a movie where it was a movie about, well, like the girl gets possessed. It was a schlocky horror film, but they were having problems with the sound, that the sound was not working. They were about to spend $60,000 to get all new equipment. They were recording in an abandoned insane asylum, I think.
No,
So they called me, they sent for me. I came out from Hawaii and I went on set, and I talked to the people involved, and I'm like, all right, give me a second and then we'll see what we can do. So I walked through the place, I did a clearing, and then they never had a problem again with the equipment. So I'm like, you know, that was not your equipment, that you were being messed with,
Aha.
you know.
Can I read off my things that the
Yes.
warfare
Yes.
that on that note, I'm going to just run down the list of the warfare that they had on this when they were making this movie. Let's see. Well, COVID hit them right at the time they started, 1 week before, and they had what they called the death party because they went to this party and everybody had it. Nobody knew that they had it, and a lot of people got sick. Okay, whatever with that. However, they got it was the movie was very close to not going through, but
Mhm.
people said that they were getting a message of stand firm, be courageous, go forward. The union tried to shut them down. The on-site priest had an appendectomy, and he was when they were he just this was the on-site priest, the on-set priest. He was rushed to the hospitals, and as they pulled his appendix out, it burst. Uh, so 1 hour later, he would have been dead. Let's see. During the shoot of How the Devil Operates, the highest sustained winds ever recorded happened, and the building was groaning and growling. And they said that every time they'd say action, the building would start to groan and growl. They said it sounded like they were in hell. And then they'd say cut, and it would stop. Okay, that was really very interesting. One of the houses that the people were staying at, as part of the crew, they came back one night and they saw that the gates to the fireplace were opened and that something had come down the chimney, and it was at Christmas time. All the religious things were destroyed. The Jesus picture was knocked down onto the ground. However, Rudolph, Frosty the Snowman, ornaments, bulbs on the tree, nothing was touched. Just the religious items were trashed. And this is all during the set, all during the movie being recorded. Let's see, like Jesus picture credit. Oh, and then they had an altar there. The priest had an altar for this protection, so on. The squirrel went up and peed all over it, and he defecated on the exact spot of the Eucharist that was prepared. So it was very, very strange. They had eight automobile accidents in 2 weeks with the people on set, and one of the people there, um, he was putting his child in the car seat and he backed away after it was done, and the child did something that he had to go forward again, and a car went past at 40 miles an hour, took his door off and missed him by inches. He said, had my child not made that move. So what they were saying was they were saying that the demonics and so on were attacking, but God was protecting. Let's see what else we have here.
Well, and a lot of times it'll be those close calls so that you know that something is going on. It's supposed to draw your attention to that and draw your attention to the fact that it didn't happen. And
Yes.
a lot of people miss that.
Oh, yeah, exactly. And then when they were doing post, a storm ripped off the roof and flooded the place. The carpets had to be redone, the walls, the sheetrock, everything was total when they were doing post production. Their Facebook advertising would not take. They said Facebook. They didn't know how to. At the QC, the final viewing, they all got there to check it out to see the final viewing, and the building shut off. All the power went out. Let's see. At the premiere, when they were doing all the interviews with people, we're going to go into the cameras didn't work. The lights were flickering on and off at the premiere. And then Tammy knows we were talking about the thing with the exorcist back there. When he wanted to clear the building, he backed up against this wall, and there was a voice behind him. And once he cleared the place, like you were talking about, everything started to work. Let's see. After the interviews with this camera, she took it out, the hard drive out, the SSD out to get it, and everything on it was wiped off. So hold on, what was that? Can you reread that?
Yeah. So what are your thoughts on the coming year, 12 months, are attacks seemingly stronger than they have been before on Earth. I think there have been periods of time where this type of activity has been seen, but not for a long time. And I do feel like it's getting stronger, but I feel like there's that, I don't know, we're like sifting. So you want to sift up instead of down, I
I
feel.
get the feeling that Allison has fears that she needs to be able to go out there and take this stuff on and throw it back and um, your divine dominion over this. Don't let it take over you. Don't be afraid. Fear is what these things live on, and just go out there with your God-given dominion over these things, and just express your power to throw it back. Don't take it.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, I pick up a lot of fear from her, and I can't see her. I don't know who she is. You know, when she asked the question, why would somebody do that about having sex with somebody? The backstory to that person is a typical example of demonic entanglement. This person is a Christian. She knows what's wrong. I'll never forget. She asked me out to dinner. She said, I really think that God is telling me I need to stay away from this stuff. I said, oh, well, how do you feel about that? That
Yeah, once you wake up.
yeah, she said, well, I think I need to listen. And literally the next day called me to say she was moving into the Halderman. And it's like, you know, I just talked to her the other day. Like, this is a person who knows right from wrong, but is continuing to allow her ego to make choices for her life, always to disastrous outcome. And it involves other families, because she also came to meet up one night saying, oh, we've got this case and we don't know what to do. Well, no, because you went in there and you taunted everything evil, and now they're all pissed off. And now she wants us to go in and clean it up. Well, it's just not always that easy. When you go in and you tell somebody with authority that you know what you're doing and you don't, you can do a lot of harm.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened. Um, and she seems to attract that kind of client all the time. She set us up into some bad situations. I mean, anybody that knows Joe from our team knows this is a little dude from New York that doesn't get rattled by anything, is very level-headed, and thinks everything through, very deliberate. Nothing excites him. Called me the night he was at one house and we were late because of her, and said, oh my God, why would you leave me here? Something dark just went through my car. I mean, I'm sorry, but I'm on my way. But it was because of her. And another situation she put those people in, I was furious. That causes so much harm when you mess with things like that and you don't understand the power of what you're messing with.
Yeah. And like I said in the beginning, it's all about faith. If
Yes.
you have the faith, I had a client who had an incident when I was not around them, and they said, look, I know you're strong, but Christ is stronger. You're not
Yeah, and
allowed to
that's
come near me.
Allison can use that because there's a lot
Mhm.
of fear I can see here. I don't know what religion Allison was brought up in, but you just go out there and if stuff comes at you, well, you just head it on, and well, you might want to do what you can, but you're absolutely nothing against God and Christ. Just get out of here, and you'll take care of it. As you behold, so will you glow.
That's pretty cool. Yes. Yeah, so it's about having the faith and having not allowing the fear to be the top emotion. I mean, we all get a little rattled sometimes.
Yeah.
It's just human nature, because your physical body's like, protect me.
Faith doesn't mean an absence of some doubt.
Right.
It's just understanding the higher. I always say, greater is he that's in me than he that's in the world. I may fall, I may fear, but I know that God has it under control. And that's just it. I mean, you can't to have the doubts put in your head is not coming from God. He wants you to have a blessed life. He wants you to prosper and to be happy and to do well. And so when you start hearing things about insufficiencies, they're never coming from God. I mean, that's not his language, but it
Well,
is his nature.
this is the true man in God's image, and you can reaffirm that. And this is where some of my viewpoints differ. I for instance, the common the common viewpoint on the resurrection and crucifixion, which I think is pretty much nonsense and religious dogma, is the fact that Jesus died for your sins, and a vengeful God. So he took your sins to save you from God and all this stuff. What is this all about? To me, the crucifixion and the resurrection was to prove the true man in God's image is perfect and eternal. And this is something that you can affirm, and it's the source of Christian healing as well. So yeah, I guess that this is the reason I don't have any. I was never brought up in any religious sphere, and I know that a lot of the material I get, people tell me a lot of times I might get something. Well, don't you believe the word of the Bible? Well, yes, but not all of it. Okay, for instance, I don't believe that a girl should be checked for the tokens of virginity, and if they're not there, she should be taken in the front of her father's house and stoned by the townspeople until she's dead. This type of there's a lot of myth and allegory, and there's what would be called maybe first century Christian doctrine, because every Bible, every version is revisionist and revealed truth. So there's about how many thousands of religions in the world, and most people will let you know that theirs is right and everyone else's is wrong. And with my meetup back there, out there, I said that if you come to this, you better have an open mind, because you need to be able to talk to everybody and get their viewpoints and not put everybody down. So if you have the ability to think and discern these things and to get rid of religious dogma, you guys were both mentioning being brought up in Catholicism, and Tammy talking about that there's damage for life with that. There are some things that when somebody starts talking fear, I'm usually right out the door, either just as far as validity of the situation or literally out the door. If somebody wants to rule by fear or govern by fear.
Well, Nefarious, that was a point of the movie, remember, too, when he was explaining how demonology and how Christ worked, and he talked about, you know, his master being about freedom and choice and joy and all that, but that the carpenter created people, and then went through this whole death on the cross thing, and his bottom line was that it created slavery with no second chance. And the problem that I have with the Bible, and then the Catholic, if you want to call it fear, that's in "you're going to hell for this," Tammy voice, is that I don't accept that. I don't accept that God would make it to the point that there's no hope. And I think that when you look at the books of the Bible, like Tom said, there's so many revisions, but even more importantly, when you look at the man, like King James was an evil human being. And
Yeah.
this is the gospel that we're following. And then Constantine choosing what books would be a part of it and leaving so many others out. It's like if I tell you a story of the news today, I can leave out 2 words and change everything. I mean, we're still fighting about the Second Amendment over a comma.
Yeah.
So, this is my problem with the literal arguing. I think the thing of it is to see God as love and pray for eyes to see that. And, to accept that he wants the best for your life and
And
to count on his power.
and along those lines, you like I said, you'll go into conventional church service, and you'll get maybe the same session or 1 week after another. First, God loves you, and this, and God this, and so and so, and then it might be the next week, and you will burn in hell if you. And the one thing that I can't accept is the fact that they talk about that if people commit suicide, they're going to go right to this eternal burning in hell and one thing and another. And I'm thinking to myself, what kind of nonsense is this? Because if a parent or something, if a child of God or a child of a parent is so despondent that they want to kill themselves or something, I mean, are you going to sit there and if your child would kill themselves, would you go out there and take the body and go like burn it or chop it up and flush it down the toilet or something? No, it's a lot of things don't make sense with religious dogma in my estimation.
Well, when you talked about the supercuts, did you see the one of the other exorcist that was confirming everything that the set exorcist said happened? Because he addressed that suicide. And what he said is that the reason the Catholic Church condemns it as a mortal sin is because that is somebody saying to God, no, I don't trust you, I don't believe you, and I don't accept your decision. But they also made room for all of the others, depression, mental illness, things that are out of your control. So it isn't as even in the Catholic Church, and I didn't know that till I listened to that priest, because I was always told that's a mortal sin. It kept my father alive for 10 years. That was the only thing kept him alive. He was convinced if he took his life, he would, you know, be damned. But that priest's explanation of it, saying that you're saying that you don't trust God's judgment, there is some validity in the thought process that we're trying to manipulate him to our outcome and that he doesn't understand our suffering. I think that was the point of Jesus's life as well, was to show us that you can suffer, you can be angry, you can be human, and you can still make the right decision.
Yeah. I kind of have a third, I guess, viewpoint on that. And it is that when someone does that, it really, I've had to cross over so many of those. So what I feel is like when somebody does that, they do end up getting stuck here. Part of it is their own fear, I believe, that they're going to the other direction. And part of it is almost like, I guess, like purgatory, we would consider it, where they're stuck here until someone can help them to cross over, because the whole point is the pain doesn't go away after you do that. It doesn't.
Well,
I
yeah,
actually have
yeah,
I have
because
a memory of doing that. I have a memory of doing that to myself. Very vivid, very visceral. And if it weren't for my child, I might still be stuck. I might have never been able to evolve. So
well,
that
once the consciousness leaves the body, it's going to be the same consciousness with the same issues.
yeah, and if it's not rejoining with source, it's not going to see the whole picture of what things were supposed to be. Now I have come across some who that was their soul contract or their agreement, because when something like that happens, it's so stark to everybody around them, whether they're directly connected with them or not, that it sends out a shockwave that wakes people up. And
Mm-hmm.
there are some people who have, agreed to make that sacrifice. I've seen that too. So I think there's a lot of different things that go into it, and it's very personal. I would not recommend it at all. But I don't feel like they are forever damned because of it.
Yeah.
I feel like you can make restitution, because generally what leads to that is just such overwhelming uh, despair and
But the priest
sorrow.
talked about that. That's what he was referring to as mental illness. I mean,
Yeah.
depression is a mental illness. We wouldn't fault somebody for dying, for refusing treatment for cancer or, something like that. Many
Oh,
people are clinically depressed and don't even realize they have an illness, and that it spirals out of control.
yeah.
So in your work, what is your thought on damnation? What is your thought on hell?
I think so. I believe in an underworld, which is what we call hell. And I feel like I don't know if I have it completely fleshed out. Let me put it this way. I have seen people whose souls are so ripped to tatters and so worn that you can't put it back in the body because the body will die immediately because the soul does not have enough energy to inhabit the body anymore or animate the body anymore. So it's like, well, if I put this person back and I dismiss what's there, then this person is going to die. The body's going to die and their consciousness is going to be released. But, you know, what do you do with that? Then is that murder on my part? Is that like what needs to happen? And I always ask the soul, and usually the soul wants to survive, so they will coexist. Um, I've seen I've seen the underworld. I've seen souls that were trapped in the underworld. I've gone and pulled like soul pieces out from there. Um, I don't feel like anything is eternal so far as like your judgment. I feel like um, we do get do-overs. If you're really bad, okay. If you're really bad, then you end up going to the underworld for a while. I like the way, so there's a couple of ideas I have on it. Um, One is there's a cartoon that's out right now that's called The Has Been Hotel, which is very interesting, like looking. But the theme behind it is that the daughter of Lucifer has this hotel where she brings in these souls to try and reform them so that they can then go to heaven because she feels like there should not be eternal damnation. That's just not, it's not fair. It's not right. Like, why would you do that? Just give people one go around and then they're stuck forever. I find that very interesting in the way that they're exploring the different themes and the different, the way they're looking at demons and the way they're looking at angels and things like that. So the Has Been Hotel, it's very interesting. Another way that I like to look at it is the TV show Lucifer. The way Lucifer describes it is that we create our own hell. So we send
Right.
ourselves, and it's our consciousness that keeps replaying the things that we're guilty of until we make a different decision. But people don't know that they can make a different decision. So they just keep doing the same thing over and over and over again. So they never escape. Like they just stay there. They're tortured forever. Um, so those two are interesting. I definitely know and have experienced many different levels of demonic um, beings or entities. So I know that they exist. I feel like almost like they're side by side with us, though. They're like on a different dimension, but still here, like on Earth, but they're just dimensionally, they're beside us. They're not right on top of us. But they're not physical. They're energetic beings. So they want to get into the physical. Like being physical is a big deal. Like I know that I came because I want to be physical. I want to experience this. I want to eat good food. I want to experience the sun on my skin. I want to smell the salt water. I
Me
want to
too.
feel the river, like, and that's why we incarnate as human and as physical beings so that we can have all these experiences. But then people take it to the extreme, and that's where you get gluttony and all that kind of thing. And plus, I do feel like we experience a broader range of emotions than most other beings. Like our range is just like huge of the emotions that we experience. And depending on the person, like some people they just have a small window of emotions. Some of us have really big emotions where they're much larger in nuance. because we've learned to separate things out and to see that nuance. But unfortunately, I think a lot of people are never shown that. Like anger isn't just anger. There's like so many levels of anger, and there's righteous anger, and there's like frustration anger, and there's, you're tired anger, there's you're hangry, and things like that. So you can't just say, well, anger is bad, because anger isn't just anger. Anger is like all this stuff. And there's some of it which definitely works against you, and other that works for you. Sometimes when you get angry, that's where you find the strength to stick up for yourself. That's where you find the strength to defend your neighbor. That's where you find your boundaries. And then senseless anger is where you brutalize other people. So to me, it's like everything is so intricate, and it's so much bigger than just, is there a heaven and hell? It's like, well, yes and no, because of the way I experience things. It's a,
Or
it's a
you're
little
just
bit
saying
different.
that you haven't really decided if there is or there isn't?
I I I believe that there is, but I don't believe it is what most people think of it as.
Right. There's so much that there's just what you just said, that these things, people they don't have the correct interpretation.
Like there's no nuance to it. Like it's just so stark, and I don't see it as being stark. I do believe that if we pass and we have a lot of guilt and we've done a lot of bad things, I believe, yes, we do end up in the underworld. And some people who have given themselves over, they get literally eaten. I believe that our souls literally can be eaten and cease to exist. Um, but that's not most people. I don't feel like
In a
that's
way,
everybody.
maybe that you're looking at life did you watch The Shift?
No, I haven't seen that yet.
Okay. Did you watch it, Tom?
No, but I will.
I
This,
thought you and Gloria went to the movies to see it. Well,
this,
'cause The Shift kind of touches on what you said, but from a standpoint of, I think, more like parallel lives. It's playing out like, if you make this decision, this is what happens. If you make this decision. And the thing of that movie is these viewing stations. It's in the future,
Mm-hmm.
and they put basically virtual reality, and they get to see on the screen all the different forms of them. Their
Mm-hmm.
their doppelgangers is what they call them, and what happened to your life if you did this choice. And so, though it doesn't come out and say it in the end, I think the point of it is that you get to make it right. And that's my only beef, if I want to say that. And that's kind of, forgive me God, like a bold statement, but like, how can you create a human being, give them choice, but know the outcome, and accept that 75-80% of them would end up damned with no opportunity? To me, that doesn't display love. And almost, I look at it as Nefarious said it, as entrapment and slavery, because not everybody's given the same opportunities in life. You may have loved your father and he may have loved you. Mine was a son of a bitch. And, that just is what it is. But I understand why he was,
Mm-hmm.
because of the background that he went through. And so I think that his soul and his spirit and personality fractured somewhere around 4 to 5 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And I can tell that by the stories that he tells. When you refer to your mother laying there dead as, I think that lady's dead, that's a fractured soul.
Mm-hmm.
A child would not refer to their mother as that lady, and he did. So I knew instantly why he was as he was, but that didn't change his outlook for life as
Mm-hmm.
somebody who would take anything from anybody he could, because he felt no guilt. He felt he was entitled, and he always had a need to prove. And so when he passed away, it's the only time I was ever at the side of somebody that I didn't see people come for him. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't sense anybody there. There was a horrible smell. There
Oh
was a
no.
look of terror in his face.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I don't even need to finish the sentence with y'all to, you know what I'm thinking. And
My
so,
grandfather too was like that. It was the only funeral I've been to, probably hundreds of funerals at this point, but it was the only funeral I ever went to that I was afraid to go up to the corpse.
yeah,
And I was like 16. So it was like I was older. I wasn't like a little kid, but it was the only time I was like, and there was a snowstorm, a blizzard that none of us could go to see him, put into the ground. My mother and my father went. My father was so mad at the priest. He goes, he's over here saying all these prayers and everything. And I told him, nobody liked this guy. Can we get done? It's cold.
my God.
I was like, oh my goodness.
My dad died at exactly 3 a.m. Easter Sunday we were there at hospice. And so he passed the midnight of Easter Sunday, died at 3 a.m. And it's ironic because we had a funeral for him at a Catholic church where he grew up. And as soon as the priest came in, all the lights went out in the church. Now,
Wow.
my father was one who was very clear that when you left his room, you need to shut the door and turn out the lights. So I thought that was interesting and hopeful a little bit that maybe he was still around. And then I went to talk to a psychic I thought it was just going to be a dumbass message circle, to be honest, and I was bored. And
Yeah.
it was $20. So I was like, well, it'll be entertaining. I wasn't expecting the real deal for sure. She was, and I was the next to the last of 13 to be read. And when she said, well, your mother's here, and all that's not important, but what was important was she said, so your father's here. He never said I love you. He never said anything positive. He started to talk about Disneyland, but she stopped. Her whole face changed. She said, he's really deliberate in his words and his actions. She said, he's making me really anxious and really uncomfortable. She said, so much that if I was in a business meeting with him, I would never feel prepared. And I thought, that's him. Like, so I don't know where he's going or where he needs to be, but I don't think he's there because, I mean, you couldn't have described him better. But he was terrified to die, terrified of the consequences. He was always very repentant of the things that he had done, but always for the wrong reason. He didn't want to go to hell, but he only wanted to go to heaven because he wanted to be with mom. And I said, but that's not how God works. He wants you to love him. And that was bullshit. And I didn't know anything. And, he's a Catholic. I don't know what more to say about that, but it's sad.
Yeah. Yeah.
But,
I remember being at my aunt's deathbed and she was terrified. Absolutely. And it was horrible to watch because when I got there, she was just like screaming silently and writhing in the bed and was just terrified. And so I went right up and I walked up to her and I put my hand on her forehead and I took her other hand. I was like, look at me. And I got her to calm down. And then I felt my grandmother come in, and my grandmother and my pop came in and took her. So I was like, you're okay. It's going to be okay. Because she wasn't a bad person. I mean, she was an alcoholic. She had moments, but at her core, and like for the majority of the time, she was just a very loving person,
yeah,
and she didn't feel like she deserved to be loved. So a lot of times she would push people away and things. But as far as I am aware, she never did anything that was so horrible, but she just felt like she didn't deserve to be loved like that. And when she saw my grandmother, because I felt them come in over my shoulder, she immediately relaxed. I was like, see, I told you. And she just kind of smiled at me and then she took her last breath and went. But I mean, I've been called a number of times to be there and to help with the crossing because a lot of people are afraid because they don't know what the line is. Like, how good or how bad do you have to be? How much have you allowed in the negativity, and how much have you affected other people negatively? And there's so much that goes into it. It's very it's more complex than people think.
Well, I like to think that there's hope. I don't think it's necessarily a judgment of what you've done in your life, but um, your acceptance of the gift of eternal life.
Mhm.
And so, um, my father never believed he could be loved. He didn't understand what love was. He would talk about my mother and like, why do you think she did these things? Because you just don't understand what love is. You don't understand that there's not conditions. You don't have to measure up. It's just, it either is or it isn't. And he never grasped that because of his background. Um, and so he rallied against it his whole life. And he was a horrible person in the things that he did. And to expunge his guilt, I think he felt the need to share things, all of those things, which I would have preferred to die not knowing,
Yeah.
frankly. You know,
Thanks,
but
but no thanks.
yeah, I mean, because and I'd watch him sit and talk to the ashes, and I'd think I'd get angry. Like if you'd have spent just half that time actually talking to her, things would have been different for both of you. It's interesting about the soul, though, because I do think that it knows when it's leaving. I remember the last day I saw my mother conscious. Was in a coma 3 days after her stroke, but we had a conversation about things that were problems our whole life, that were like things we'd argue about.
Mm-hmm.
And we sat there and talked about it that whole day. And I remember the look on her face when I drove away, and I looked back and I thought, that means something. Instinctively, I knew that,
Mm-hmm.
but you can't imagine that that's the last time you're going to see somebody that seems to be okay. So it did. But that night, she climbed up the stairs on her hands and knees to my dad's bed and slept with him. She hadn't done that in 10 years. And I know with no doubt that her soul left her body before she passed to avoid the pain. I have a
Mm-hmm.
picture of it.
Oh
And
wow.
absolutely convinced that was inspired by God, because I would never have taken a picture of my mother in that condition. She would not have allowed it. And I knew that when I was doing it. And then, of course, the ghost hunter kicks in. You got to take three, Tammy. So it's only in one picture, but I can see her spirit come up. And it was at that exact time. And the interesting thing was, I've always wondered, should I share that with anybody?
Mm.
And we were getting ready to do a paranormal presentation that we do every Halloween. And I pulled it out and I looked at it, and her face was pixeled out. It looked like a demon. I screamed, it scared me. And then I got a little bit of control of myself and I called Lil. I said, she doesn't want anybody to see her face. She's okay if you know that there's hope, but she doesn't want anybody to know who she is. Because it was just her face, nothing else.
That's your mom going
It
for the
was
picture.
exactly what it was. Yep. She didn't want anybody to know her. So it's amazing the control they have even on the other side. And things that psychic told me that day were things that were going on in my house. Like nobody knew that. She said, you did a good job of cutting your son's hair. I haven't done that in 15 years, but I had just done it the night before I went to the psychic because he
Wow.
didn't have money to go get his hair cut. And he looked like Bob Ross. I'm like, Mark, people are laughing at because he gets an afro when it goes up. I mean, just so many things. It's incredible what people will be able to tell you, but there, as you know, there's a lot of them out there that don't, and they take advantage of people, and it's really heartbreaking because people come in desperation for answers, and what they get is bullshit, and it's sad. But she took me by surprise, and she was that way with every single person in the room, which you don't see that often at
Do you
a
remember her name?
um no, but I will find it and I will send it to you. Um,
Yeah, if you're, might as well give kudos to those of us that are authentic.
yeah, Anna Marie something. She's from Mechanicsburg. Anna Marie, I can't remember her last name, but I'm sure it's on one of my PayPal stubs, and I'll let you know.
Okay.
Um, she she was really incredible. Um, I don't often hold out hope for things like that, to be honest. So I was shocked.
Well, that's good because then you're pleasantly surprised.
I was.
So let's wrap up. What are the top things that you think either people should pay attention to about the movie or that you think were very important messages in the movie?
Anna Marie Heckert is her name.
Heckert. Okay.
Heckert. So if anybody's in Pennsylvania and wants to see somebody face to face up my way, she's pretty good. I know you're in Pennsylvania, but you're a bit of a drive for some of us. But
Yeah.
I like face to face. Like I like to feel people's energy.
Yeah, I enjoy that too. I want to do more stuff where I'm with people,
Yeah.
but it seems like every time I find a place, something happens. So I don't know. I don't know what's going on.
Well, it wasn't what I expected. I was thinking I was going to an angel circle. I thought they were going to
Mhm.
talk about angels and maybe my guardian angels.
Mhm.
All these people knew what I didn't know, and they came with all these things they wanted to make contact with people, and it's like
Wait a
I
second.
didn't even know why I was there. So it was definitely a surprise. Yeah.
Okay. So, movie highlights. How about you tell us, Tom, since you have the most notes out of everybody?
There are none. There are none. It's the whole hog. I wish that who was it that was just left? Was it Melissa?
Alyssa.
I wish she was
Allison.
still, Alice. I wish she was still here because there's nothing to fear about this movie. This movie is an advanced master class in in things that people. It was the whole movie. It's just something everybody should see. I mean, if you have any interest outside of the material world, you should see this, the whole thing.
Okay, Tammy.
Yeah, I agree. I didn't think that the movie left you in a state of fear. I think knowledge is power, and so to be able to see the way that negative things can affect your life, if you can view that in somebody else's life like that, where it's not affecting yours, and like Tom said, all the different ways in the director's cuts that God had their back. Even
Mm-hmm.
things like the groaning, there was also a thunderstorm. So they incorporated that into a positive. And I think it gives hope that you can defeat it, that there's a higher power that has your back. And I think everybody should see it because it's not the theatrics that Hollywood makes you think.
Exactly. Well, and one of the I saw a an interview with a priest who was saying that he really enjoyed it because they were not glamorizing the power
Right.
of the demonic. Because I mean, let's face it, most of the time when we come up against them, it's more the whispering in your ear, the like little annoying things, hiding your keys, doing crap like that to get you angry. It's not the getting drug up the steps or thrown into a wall or spitting pea soup and all that stuff. That's like extreme. And it happens seldom,
Right.
but it's the little stuff. That's the little stuff that you have to be aware of. And it's very, very subtle. And the part that I liked was when he said, well, I like the whole thing also, but when he said he says, well, didn't Edward's friends and family notice? And he's like, no, they didn't notice. It happened so slowly over time that that's just Ed. He just does that. He just drinks and gets blackout drunk and gets in fights and does this and does that,
Yeah.
and he didn't say it like that, but that's basically, I'm always like, no alcohol, no illicit drugs, you know, be in control of your physical body and your mind at all times. You don't invite anything in to utilize your body because anything that is, and this is my own thing, because I don't like the idea of channeling anything that's going to
Yes.
talk
Me
through
either.
me.
Yep.
Um, Anything that needs to talk to me can talk to me, and I could hear it very clearly. And if it needs to, and it's throughout the Bible, angels will manifest and take on human form to be talking to you face to face if you're not sensitive sensitive like we are. So they don't need to channel through somebody's body. They don't need to utilize somebody else's flesh. That to me is opening doors that you don't want to open.
That's a good point because people don't realize that, sometimes you meet people and you're like, wow, that was just such an
Yep.
incredible experience. And I think that's angels, coming to help.
Hmm.
Well, and
Hmm.
there's a YouTube video where there's this crash, and this priest, like they all talk about this priest coming and talking to the different people and calming them down and everything. And even like the rescue workers are talking about this priest. And then you see the footage of it, there's nobody.
Right. Right.
It's like, maybe. And it's because they can, manifest physically. And sometimes it's just like you're seeing them, but they're not actually physically there.
As do demons. And that's the
Oh,
other,
yeah.
it's just, you said about things changing, but lately, there's sometimes I'm watching something on TV and I'll look at them and I'm like, that's a demon. Like, I don't know if that person was a placekeeper and they're just not there anymore, or if they've totally surrendered to control or what's going on. But there's not that many people in this. There can't be that many people that freaking stupid and evil. Something has taken over and engineered their lives. There's just
Mhm.
no other explanation for what's going on. It's not people. And so when you run into some of these, they may come across as somebody that's doing everything positive to you to build up your ego, to entrap you into something. If they're out of place and it's unusual, you have to pay attention to that too, because it may be the opposite of the angels.
Yeah.
And
Well, like in my book, I talk about the difference between the angels of God and fallen angels.
Mhm.
Their energy signature is the same. They feel exactly the same. The difference is what they're trying to do. So the angels of God, they want you to, be a part of heaven and do for everyone, whereas the fallen angels are more about building up the ego and you being dependent on them and worshiping them specifically. And they're really hard to get rid of, really hard to get rid of once they're there. It's possible, but you have to really want that.
Well, ego is our biggest struggle in life because
Yeah.
we want to accomplish things and we want to do them well and we want to be acknowledged when we do them well. But therein lies the biggest trap of humanity. So it is a struggle to have that balance.
Yes. So we can go on talking forever.
I'll tell you what something is, we're an hour overtime and it's only the three of us.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
That shows the good stuff of the conversation.
Exactly. Exactly. Yes. So I am going to
Be down
do,
next week, Tom.
yeah.
I do what?
I said Gerald and I are coming down next week.
Okay, I'll have everything ready for you.
I
Yes.
would go, actually.
Well, I should be available next week. We'll see. I would love that. But this is being recorded, so we'll talk about that later. Um, so everybody knows I am going to do a meetup and a YouTube video on spiritual attack because I think it's really important right now to be able to discern what's coming from outside of ourselves and what's creating things. Because there are a lot of symptoms that we don't necessarily see that way that we need to be aware of and looking at, like chronic fatigue is one of them. That's when you're being fed upon. So I do want to talk about that. If there's anything else that you guys want to talk about, maybe we should all watch The Shift
Yeah.
and then, get together and talk about that. But thank you so much for being my co-host tonight. And we will see you next time on Mystery, Mystics, and Metaphysics. All righty. Let's wrap it up. And don't forget to subscribe if you made it this far.